Hosea chapter 1. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, the son of Berai, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. Hosea and his wife and children. When the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, "Go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom, and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord." So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And the Lord said to him, "Call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." She conceived again and bore a daughter, and the Lord said to him, "Call her name No Mercy, for I will no more have mercy on the house of Israel to forgive them at all, but I will have mercy on the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God. I will not save them by bow or by sword or by war or by horses or by horsemen." When she had weaned No Mercy, she conceived and bore a son, and the Lord said, "Call his name Not My People, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. Yet the number of children of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in that place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' it shall be said to them, 'Children of the living God.' And the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together, and they shall appoint for themselves one head, and they shall go up from the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel." The word of the Lord. You may be seated. Well, good morning, church. If you're joining us for the first time, let me just say welcome on behalf of Phos Church. Collectively, the people who assemble here, we are Phos, and we just want to extend a welcome to you and thank you for joining us for worship on this beautiful fall day. I mean, honestly, we have some beautiful weather today. The Lions are still going to disappoint you, but beyond that, we still have a good Sunday opportunity to gather here, worship, sing songs to our King, and open up his word and just marvel at his book. And last week I was encouraged leaving the service, because I just received a lot of encouragement from a lot of you, just that you appreciated the message, and I just thought it was the most it's ever been. Most text messages I ever gotten, things like that. And so I just left thinking, I guess if you talk about human anatomy explicitly enough, people get what you're talking about and what you're laying down. So I'm going to try and be as explicit as I can be. No. We are starting a new series this morning called A War of Loves, a 8-week study through the book of Hosea, where what we get to do in these next 8 weeks is just dive right in deep. We get to look at the recesses of God's love. We get to get underneath all of the fluff, but really get into how deep does this love go? We just sing that song, "How deep the Father's love for us." Never going to sing again. But we sing that song and we ask that question and we think about it and we ponder. And I think many people really do ponder the question about God's love. Whether it's for them, whether it's good, whether it can be trusted. And so for really these next several weeks, that's what we're looking at. And I think one of the great barriers that we need to address right up front, and we need to talk about when we're talking about the love of God, is that we're not talking about something that's contractual. To me, this is going to be one of the great barriers we have to leap over in order to get the depth of God's love, that it's not contractual. And that's hard for us to imagine because our whole lives are wrapped in contracts. There's so many things that if I do X, Y, and Z, this is the expectation. That if I do this, then this will be the outcome. Right? There's just so many common truisms that people live their lives by. One of which is to be a friend, or to have a friend, you need to what? Be a friend. That in order for me to have friendship, I need to be a friend. And I'm telling you right now, if you're going to go out there and be a jerk, you're probably not going to have friends. So there's There's truth to that claim. To have a friend requires you to be a friend. But so much of our lives are wrapped into this idea, if I do X, Y, and Z, if I, we go to our jobs. Most of you probably have a legal binding contract with your job that you're going to work your 40, 50, 60-hour week. And at the end of it, there's going to be some more money in your account. There's going to be some more holiday or vacation hours that you've acquired. There's going to be things that, because I've done my duties, then this is what I'm being compensated. Right? So we see this with our jobs. Meijer, Walmart, wherever you do your grocery shopping, Costco, has expectations of you. The expectation is, hey, we're going to supply a bunch of goods, and you can spend your whole Saturday going around, filling up your cart, trying the samples. But guess what? You don't get to just leave with the cart. That's called stealing, and you'll get arrested. Right? There's an expectation then that you're going to go through a cashier register checkout, and you're going to exchange goods. You're going to swipe some plastic or metal if you're bougie that way. And you guys on that level? You're going to exchange some level of good, right? And we live our lives this way. And this is generally how we operate in life. For most of us, we even understand this in the way how we understand love. In order for me to be loved, my life better be put together. I better be bubbly or outgoing. I better be the life of the party. I better have some great stories. I better look a certain way. I better dress a certain way in order for us to feel loved. And none of us are going to say that. None of us are going to communicate that with our words that, oh yeah, I dress this way, or I want to be presented this way because I want people to love me. Nobody says that, but with our lives and the actions that we do, we scream this. Marketing has tapped into this. Think about your clothing commercials that you watch. I got one, if we can cue it up. This is one of my favorite ones. But before we play it, I want you to be intentionally looking for things that you think Wrangler Jeans is trying to communicate. So with that in mind, let's hit it. You guys ready to buy some Wrangler? Wrangler was trying to communicate a few things in that commercial. One of the things that they want you to think about is, if I buy their product, if I buy Wrangler jeans, I'm going to move swiftly. I'm going to move well. Notice how the guy didn't drop the pass as he was diving into the swamp? They want you to believe that that's you. But really what's you is you're probably going to trip and hurt your ankle and spend a weekend in the ER. But, they want you to think that, hey, if I wear their product, I'm going to be moving around good, well, it's a great product, and I'm probably going to win the game for us. And for most of us, we're sitting here and thinking, well, that's not going to get my business. Probably not. Yeah, that's a very niche, probably part of the commercial of people they're trying to target. But the thing that they want you to buy, the thing that they are communicating in that message, is that if you wear their product, you might think I'm overlooking into this too much. If you wear their product, you're going to have community. You're going to have people around you that care about you. Did you notice how the dog couldn't wait to just rub up against Brett? Like, even if you're wearing the jeans, the dog can't resist you. And there's a level of, we laugh at that, but I'm telling you, there's a level of this that they're trying to get you to buy. You need to look this way in order for that dog to rub up on you. There's a level of that we do, that we buy into, that we believe that I got to look a certain way, that I got to dress a certain way. Think about when you go to get-togethers. Maybe it's people you don't know. It's just a cosmopolitan group of people that you're just, in the mix of. You want to tell a funny story. You want to have a good joke. You want to have a great story, because that's how people buy into you. Right? You think that, man, I have to be engaging. I have to be outgoing. I got to be bubbly. I got to be all these things in order for this group of people that I don't know to accept me, to love me, to welcome me. In some level, we go into these environments hoping that we're going to get in. And we're going to weave our way in to the love and acceptance of people. And how we do that is thinking that we need to be outgoing. Now, all of these things, having your life put together, dressing well, looking well, being outgoing, none of those are bad things. I'm not saying that those are a bad thing. But when we start saying that this is the determination for whether I'm worthy to be loved or not, we're getting into dangerous territory. And we don't say this with our words, but we say this with our actions. And when it comes to the opportunity to be loved in our world, those things like being put together, dressing well, all that stuff does matter. From the worldly standpoint, from culture's perspective, those things do matter. And I'm not saying that they should. I'm just saying I can read studies. That this is the reality we're living in. In 2017, Psychology Today posted an article by a PhD from Harvard named Vinita Mehta. And the title of her article was, "Do Beautiful People Have Better Relationships?" Do beautiful people have better relationships? And the experiment was really 4 different studies that she did. But the studies really concluded that what she was looking to gather was divorce rates between attractive couples, divorce rates between celebrities, people of affluence, influence. And at the end of all of this studies, what the studies gathered was that, yes, couples that were listed as attractive were at a way higher rate of divorce. And I looked at it and I felt doomed. Making sure you're paying attention. And this is what Vinita concluded with. So according to these studies, being good looking may make a person a more desirable partner, at least at the outset of relationships. But it's certainly no predictor of whether a relationship will be happy or long lasting. But the little quip that I gathered in that was, from the onset, this is, being good looking has a level of privilege to it. Right? And there's a level of, yeah, this is an advantage to have being good looking, but it has nothing to do with the quality of love that's being had. It has nothing to do with it. In fact, it might actually be a detriment, according to these studies. BusinessInsider.com has an article called 11 Reasons Why Attractive People Go Farther. 11 reasons why attractive people go farther. The dating world has completely moved online to apps where people swipe and make determinations of whether or not I'm going to be interested as a romantic partner with this person solely based off of attraction. I know you're really studying their profile. I know. No, we make it off of appearance. And I'm not saying that appearances don't matter. I'm not saying attraction doesn't matter. But we have way overhyped it. And with a culture that screams this, look this way, act this way in order to be loved, you think that's going to affect how then we approach God? You think then, if everything in our world tells us I have to do think, and then I'm loved, we're going to approach God with this warped mind of I've got to do think in order to be loved by God. And if the moment we use this contractual definition for God's love, this is what it looks like. It looks like an adult in a kiddie pool. That's what it looks like when we come in and we treat God's love like it's contractual and we sing, "How deep the Father." When we do that but we've treated God's love as contractual, we look like an adult standing in a kiddie pool, occasionally splashing, "Isn't this awesome?" That's what that looks like. And so my hope for this next 8 weeks, that we would see the deep depth of the ocean. Because that's what I believe God's love looks like in comparison to a contractual kind of love. It's deep, it's vast, it's wide, there's so much more to this. That's why Paul would pray that, hey, I need the Spirit in Ephesians 3 to intercede for me, that you might be able to comprehend the love of God that's in Christ Jesus. Its height, its depth, width. Paul couldn't do it in human words. And so that's what I'm hoping to do this. Pray that the Spirit moves supernaturally in our midst. That it would illuminate your hearts and your eyes and your mind to understand the depth of God's love. And so the book of Hosea was written by a prophet who was living in the northern kingdom of Israel. You'll see that in the first verse. There's two separate kingdoms. There's two separate reigning of kings. You have the northern kingdom that you'll see throughout the book that Hosea will refer to as Ephraim or Jacob or just simply Israel. And then you have the southern kingdom of Judah. But Hosea is a prophet living in the northern kingdom of Israel. And his name is this. Write this down. You don't want to miss this. His name's Hosea. Probably comes as a big shocker to a lot of you. But Hosea's name, that's the English translation, his Hebrew name is Hosea. Hosea, and that word literally means salvation. And so you can only imagine where we're going this next 8 weeks, what we're going to talk about, this beautiful story of salvation. And Hosea is the 12th to last book of your Old Testament. It's the beginning of what's called the minor prophets. Now, when we hear the word minor, maybe you're a baseball fan and you think, minor, that must mean not as good as major. The major prophets must be the big shooters. Hosea is probably writing this because Isaiah was busy. They're actually writing their books at the same time. But northern kingdom, southern kingdom, not getting in there right now. That's not my point. But minor is not lesser. It's not less important. It's simply talking about duration of message. Now, so the minor prophets, you don't want to graze over those and think that there's nothing significant in them. There's actually a lot of significance in the minor prophets. Hosea kicks us off. And these books aren't in chronological order. I hope I didn't just ruin that for you, but Hosea, which comes right after Daniel, Hosea's ministry happened 130 years before Daniel was born. But it's just how they canonize the scriptures. Now, so it's not chronological, but Hosea is writing in a time where you would see this in 2 Kings chapter 14. That's really, if you want to, in your Bible, ever write 2 Kings 14, this is when Hosea is, writing to the people in Israel and the northern kingdom. But he's got a message. He's a prophet. He's a prophet of God who's going to speak for God. And that's what a prophet does. A prophet hears from God and a prophet speaks for God. Not one or the other, it's a both and. A prophet will hear from God and speak for God. Now I want to say something, and it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but we're going to go on it. Because there's a lot of dangers today online. You could go online, you could start reading books of people who are calling themselves prophets and that they're speaking for God. And I'm not saying God doesn't still interact with his creation. I'm not saying God doesn't still speak to his people. But you need to be very careful when you call yourself a prophet, because there's no new revelation that God's giving the church. There is zero new truth that hasn't been preserved for millennia. God wasn't leaving out this truth until 2021 and you came along, or this author came along and told you, tell this to the church. No, we already have all of God's revelation. Now there's not any new divine revelation. There can be new divine intervention where God, yes, interacts with his creation and gets involved with his people and gives you impressions and leads you still. That still can happen. But when we start saying, God's got a message for me to give to the church, it better be in the scripture. It better be in alignment here. There's dangers online. And so write this down if you're taking notes. Any message that you need from God, any message that you need from God is found in his word. think we would love for God to just whisper in our ear this new revelation of truth. But in reality, God has shouted for millennia through the prophets and the apostles everything that we need to know about him, about his character, about his nature, about his love. And so the clearest way, if you want to hear from God today, the clearest way, the best way that you can do this is read his word out loud. You want to hear God's message to you today? Read his word out loud. And the reason why I went on this little bit rabbit trail is because I've heard some wonky things followed by, and God told me. Well, God told the Apostle Paul something different. So either Paul's lying or you are, and I'm going to go with you. I'm just not going to go against the word of God. If it contradicts the word of God, I know that ain't from God. Because that's not how God operates. But I've also heard faithful people saying, led by the Lord, led by the Spirit. I've got, I want to share this with you, this encouragement with you. And it was so spot on, it was spooky. So I don't ever want to diminish that the Spirit's still working and alive and giving impressions to people and leading people. But we need to be careful that we're not misunderstanding what a prophet is and what they've done. God has spoken long ago through the prophets and the apostles. Hosea is a prophet. He's got a message for Israel. God's going to tell Hosea, hey, Hosea, I'm going to set you up with a wife. I've got a wife for you that I'm going to set you up with. I'm just putting myself in Hosea's shoes as a single guy. This is probably going to be awesome. Like, God is my matchmaker. He knows what I like, what I don't like. He is going to get it spot on for me. And I'll tell you what. God's not just going to tell Hosea, I got a wife for you. He's going to tell Hosea that this love relationship that Hosea is going to have with his wife is going to be an illustration, a picture of God's love with the people of Israel, these Jewish people. And so at this point, I'm getting even more and more excited. I'm thinking, man, God is going to set me up with the perfect person. You see, throughout the scriptures, both old and new, what we see God doing is he communicates this love relationship that he has with his people. And the illustration he always uses is marriage. And I think we see that in the New Testament, undoubtedly. Nobody would argue that. But he does it in the Old Testament. He does it in the Old Testament with the nation of Israel, where he communicates about this covenant relationship. He says this in Isaiah 54, verse 5. For your maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. He calls himself the husband. Isaiah 62, verse 5. As a young man marries a young woman, so will your builder marry you. As a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you. Jeremiah 3, verse 14. Return, faithless people, declares the Lord, for I am your husband. I will choose you, one from a town and two from a clan, and bring you to Zion. Over and over in the Old Testament, you can see these allegorical things that are said about God's love with these people. Right? He calls himself the husband. In the New Testament, then Matthew chapter 9, verses 14 through 15. Then John's disciples came and asked him, how is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? Jesus answered, how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he's with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, then they will fast. Hey, husband and wife, we're enjoying fellowship right now. Would you mind your business? Jesus is in his moment calling himself the groom and the bride. Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 virgins, is communicating Jesus coming after his bride. Ephesians 5, any wedding that I've ever done, I always use this passage, and I love the ending of Ephesians 5, when Paul says, I'm talking about this great mystery. And you might think I'm talking about the man and the woman, but I'm talking about Jesus and the church. And so anytime Paul right there is laying down this marital language, really what he's trying to get you to understand under it all is that this is Jesus' love for the church. And that this is what you ought to model your love after. And then in Revelation 19, all of Scripture is this one long love story working to a wedding. That's how Revelation ends, with a wedding. That's what we're working towards. This big, beautiful love story. And this is the illustration he uses, husband and wife. And here's what I know about marriage without being married. It's hard. It's work. It's difficult. There's problems. Conflicts happen. Because not only is you bring two broken people together, but you also just bring two different people together. Right? People who have different ideas and opinions and thoughts on how things ought to work. And, and that's hard because there's also a big language barrier, right? You have manese and womanese, and oftentimes those don't compute. You hear two separate things. And then the conflict arises over the communication. But in this story that God is teaching the nation of Israel through Hosea, the problem is not hinged on communication. The problem hinges on the fact that the wife, Gomer, has gone and sought love in other places. You see the word when we read through the scripture? Whoredom, 21st century, whore. She's prostituting herself around, and that's the conflict. I mean, how could you have real love when this is happening? There's major conflict. So we see in that Hosea isn't being set up with a beautiful, faithful, loving bride. He's going to tell Hosea, hey, go find the one that's broken. Go find the one that's dirty. Go find the one that's really messed up. And marry that one. That's the one I want you to marry, because I want this whole nation to understand our relationship here. How great my love is, how unfaithful you've been. And so this is a great story. And I love that God uses the illustration of marriage. But again, we come to this thing broken. We come and look at this differently than how we ought to because of how we understand marriage in our cultural context. As generations come and go, we are not getting better at this. We are not getting better at this. From even your grandparents' generation to the generation we're living in today. Very different. And a lot worse. And a lot worse. Divorce rates are climbing and growing more and more. And oftentimes what has happened in our cultural context is we view marriage as contractual. If I do X, Y, and Z, then my spouse has to love me. Then they have to keep me. Then they have to accept me. Then I'm worthy of love. And that's just not true. The Bible's definition is covenantal. It's so much deeper than contractual. And I'm not saying that covenantal doesn't get you hurt at times. I'm not saying it doesn't get you wounded. But covenantal is what God has given us for the design. That's why we have vows. You ever thought about that portion in the ceremony? Better for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. Hear me. You don't say those vows because you're going to leave if it gets awesome. You're not vowing to say, hey, I'm vowing to stay as long as everything's amazing. That's not what happens. Hey, if we get really rich, I'm staying. We get really healthy, I'm in. That's not the reason you say those words. You say them if we lose every financial thing that's owned to us. If you get sick, if I get sick, no one's leaving here. That's why you say those vows. It's a really much more beautiful picture than contractual. No matter what befalls us, I'm in. I'm not going anywhere. What was that, a conference back in 16 or 17? A bunch of college kids. And great conference. I'm not speaking ill about the conference. I'm going to speak ill about a situation that happened. Great worship, great preaching, and it's one of the biggest conferences for college kids in the nation. And a segment of the conference was a woman by the name Catherine Wolfe. Anybody know Catherine Wolfe? Heard her story? A few people. Now Catherine Wolfe had a terrible stroke, lost a lot of mobility. She survived, but there was a lot of problems that came along with it. And so she's sharing her story, and it's really powerful. But at the very end, the person that's talking with her says, and can we give it up for her husband that despite how hard it's been, he hasn't left and he stayed by her side? And everyone's applauding. And I'm sitting there and I'm just hung up on the words that he hasn't left. Thanks for keeping your promise. That's what it felt like. I'm sitting there, I'm like, what do you mean? Let's praise, let's honor that he hasn't left. That's what he's vowed to. In sickness and in health. Things have gone really, really bad, and I'm not trying to diminish that or take away how hard a lot of those days probably were in the hospital and trying to operate your life still. I can imagine that was hard and difficult. And so if it was said differently, maybe it was said, hey, and her husband's with us, and he's stuck by her side through all of this, and he's done, he's served so well. The one thing to say, honoring the service, honoring the care, that's one thing, but he hasn't left. I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. I'm trying to get my own heart right. But God's design for marriage is not contractual. One author, Matt Chandler of The Mingling of Souls, says it this way: love says, I've seen the worst of you and I'm not going anywhere. Love says, I've seen the worst of you and I'm not going anywhere. And this is the kind of love that we want to explore these next 8 weeks. The kind of love that God has for his people. And it will be a struggle for us. It will be to get our minds wrapped around this kind of love. But I think that if we do, I think if the Holy Spirit grants us the eyes and the knowledge of knowing and understanding this love, I think we have real shot at healing. I think we have real shot at healing because you can trace almost all or any insecurity back to the idea of not feeling loved, seen, heard, or valued. 99% of your insecurities that you walked into this room today with, almost all of them can be traced back to not feeling loved, seen, heard, or valued. And so if we could get our eyes and minds wrapped around this reality, what might God's love do to that parental wound that you have? That parental wound that you have, in which you never felt loved or cared about, or what God's love might do to those words that were spoken about you, whether to you or behind your back. What might God's love do in those moments where you felt dismissed or overlooked? Because in the climax of the story of the Bible, the king shows up. Right in the middle of it all, the king shows up. And he goes and he loves the broken, the dirty, the overlooked, the sinful creature. That's why God's love is amazing. Because in the mix of your brokenness, that's when he came. It was that while we were still sinners, that Christ would come and he would die. The homecoming king didn't go find the prettiest girl at the ball. He went behind the bleachers. And he found the girl there that was hiding and broken and dirty and shameful. And he says, can I have this dance? How beautiful is that story? How heartfelt is that story? Over and over the last 5 years where I've been intentional in pastoral ministry, so many people I've encountered, I don't feel worthy of church. I don't feel like I'd be accepted. And my whole mindset is always, man, the church is doing such a poor job then. If you are the person that's feeling unwanted. That because you're broken, because you're dirty, because you feel shame, that I'm no good. Hear me, if you write anything down, I'm going to say this slow so you can write it. To be broken, wounded, and dirty. To be broken, wounded, and dirty makes you a candidate for God's grace. To be broken, wounded, and dirty makes you a candidate for God's grace. That's what Jesus said. Jesus said, I haven't come for the healthy. The healthy don't need a doctor, but I've come for the sick, the broken. That's who Jesus has come for. And so to understand God's love, you need to understand that you are broken, that you are dirty, and that despite that, he still loves you. And so I don't know where you are this morning, but if you've come in feeling like Hot Mess Express, like your life is in shambles, and maybe it is, I hope that God's love interacts with you in a very real way this morning. I hope that it interacts with your brokenness, because here's the reality. I don't believe that the circumstances of your life are too messy for God to clean up. I don't feel like they're too messy. I don't feel like there's a puzzle facing your life that's too complex for God to solve. Right? You're not the one story in all of human history where God says, man, yeah, you broke it. You messed up too bad. Sorry, but that's it. No, you're not the one person. And to have that is to have an exaltation of self that I'm the one person that can stump God in his ability to heal and forgive and to love. You're not that person. Nobody's that person. He doesn't get stumped. Now, I think it would only be fitting that as we kick off our series going through the book of Hosea, that we would open up the book of Hosea. So I've tried to do, for the most part of this message, laying a foundation for the next 8 weeks for us as we look through this book, as we understand the book of Hosea. But I do want us to see something in Hosea chapter 1 today. I don't want us leaving here without missing this. And so, if you would, you can look at the screen or in your Bible, but Hosea chapter 1. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, the son of Berai, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. That's the southern region. That's the southern region right there. Those kings ruled the southern kingdom. You see, after Solomon and David, there was a civil war, so to speak, and there was a split in the nation of Israel. You have the northern and southern kingdom. This is the southern. But now we're going to look at the northern. And in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, the king of Israel. Now, Jeroboam, again, you see this in 2 Kings 14. It was in his rule and his reign that Hosea is writing and doing his ministry. And in this time, under Jeroboam II, we see a ton of political prosperity. The nation is growing and blowing. They're experiencing victory left and right. There's a lot of good things happening in the nation of Israel at this moment, under this king. But there's moral decay. There was apostasy, people denying God. And that's not going to go unnoticed. Despite whatever the rest of the world sees and sees this prosperity and all these good things happening, underlining all of it, what really matters is the relationship with God, and it's broken. Verse 2. When the Lord spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom and have a children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom, forsaking the Lord. I look at verse 2, and we see God tell Hosea, hey, that woman Gomer, go marry her. You know what's worse than being married to a prostitute? Being married to a prostitute named Gomer. She's from Mayberry, right? And Hosea doesn't necessarily get the inside scoop. He doesn't get this, don't worry, Hosea, everything's going to work out. But by the way, go marry Gomer. He doesn't get it. Go marry Gomer. Go take for you a wife of whoredom. That woman who's loose around the town, go marry her. And I'm honest, I don't know if I could do that. Unless I had that inside scoop, right? Like, tell me more. If it was just go, I'm apprehensive. I'll be honest. And then what God does right after that, immediately after, he says, the nation of Israel is just like Gomer, just like her. They have forsaken him. They've broken the covenant. And it goes from bad to worse. Because not only now do you have this broken marriage, this broken relationship, we're going to introduce kids to the story. Verse 3, so he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Now, I love that the names that are given. These are really spectacular names. And for you parents in the room, I'm sure none of you are willy-nilly about naming your children. I'm sure most of you probably sat down and you had a list, and he had a list, and she had a list, and you looked at your list, and you said, okay, well, what ones are we crossing off? And I'm sure if you had if there were any X's names on there, I'm sure all of those were gone. Right? We take names relatively serious as parents, don't you? And God's not going to let Hosea and Gomer name these children. Because he's got great intentionality with wanting to name the 3 children that they have. Verse 4, and the Lord said to him, call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. So first we get Jezreel, whose name means scatter. It means scatter, and that means something because of what's going to happen to the nation. The Assyrian Empire, the Assyrian army is going to come in, and they're going to wreak havoc on the northern kingdom of Israel. They're going to come in, and they're going to do some business. They're going to do some work. And again, the book's not chronological, so you're going to see that take place in Daniel, but not in Hosea. Again, not chronological in timeline. And so the name literally means to scatter. We're going to see that come about. And the house of Jehu is going to be destroyed. So Israel's under Jeroboam II, and he's a part of the house dynasty of Jehu. And essentially in this moment, remember, I told you that they are going through great prosperity, great political prosperity. They're going through, their nation's experiencing nothing but abundance. And what God is saying in the birth of Jezreel is he's saying, hey, what your unfaithfulness is getting you, the offspring of your unfaithfulness is that I'm going to take it all away. All that prosperity, everything that's come about, I'm going to scatter, I'm going to break it. It's not going to be anymore. And I'm going to, all the political prosperity that you've won, it's gone now. And man, I don't ever necessarily want to read the Bible. I never want to read the Bible with Western eyes. But when I put it in our perspective, in our context, I just think about, man, the U.S. has had some good years. We've had some really, really good years. And from the outside perspective, economic, political, prosperity, we've experienced it here. But at the cost of moral decay. I'm worried. I just am. I'm worried about if this is, this is true. That God in love could destroy this. That God in love can make the prosperity go away. And next week we will see that God's judgment is actually an act of love. It's actually an act of love. He's going to strip away their prosperity. Then Hosea and Gomer conceive a daughter. She gets a really special name. No Mercy. Maybe it was in her online dating profile. Right? You're like scrolling through and you come across somebody with the name No Mercy. Like you're probably someone special. Interesting name. But as we look at the split within the nation, the northern and southern kingdom, what gets laid out is that one of these kingdoms is going to receive mercy and the other one isn't. That the nation, the northern kingdom, is not going to be shown mercy, but the southern kingdom of Judah, God will show them mercy. 2 Kings 18 would lead us to believe that the southern kingdom was more faithful towards God. And here's my question. Is God going to show them mercy because they were more faithful than the northern kingdom? Maybe. But I want to say this. It doesn't really matter if Judah was more worthy of mercy than Israel was, because if we're taking that word, by its very nature, mercy is mercy. Right? Whether you're deserving of it or not. If one deserves leniency, then the leniency is a matter of justice, not of mercy. Making it right. But mercy, on the other hand, is only shown to the guilty. Therefore, it's within the wise and loving heart of God to show mercy on whom he will show mercy. That's Romans 9, verse 15. No one is ever unfair for not showing mercy. No one is ever unfair for not showing mercy. And so God here, through the offspring of no mercy, is communicating something. And what he's communicating is, listen, Israel, you're not entitled to anything. You're not entitled to my love. There's no guarantee of mercy here. This isn't something that you're entitled to. I love when God chooses the nation of Israel. He says, hey, I didn't choose you because you were great in number. I didn't choose you because there was something spectacular about you. I chose you because I'm spectacular and I'm good. That he would look at this small, problematic nation and say, I'll choose you. They're not entitled to anything. And then lastly, the birth of another son, and probably my favorite name of the three. Not my people. Showing up to school. What's your name? Not my people. Not my people. Now, some scholars have speculated on this name, not my people. Some would argue that not my people would be the offspring of Gomer, but not Hosea. Because as you continue on in the story of the book of Hosea, she doesn't stop her prostituting. She's still around the town. And so maybe this is not Hosea's child. Maybe it's evident in his appearance. That's one understanding. But the message that God had to deliver through Israel was hard enough in and of itself, and then he has to have Hosea live it. He has Hosea live it. But there's something going on here with the name, not my people. This was not a sentence or a penalty. This was not a sentence or a penalty. It was a simple stating of fact. It wasn't if the people wanted to be the people of God, and then God was rejecting them. It wasn't like, hey, please take us, and God's just saying, no, you're not my people, and I'm not your God. That's not what's happening here. These are people who really claim they want to be, or these are people who are not, who've rejected God. And here the Lord simply recognizes it. He would not play, hey, let's pretend. Let's pretend you're my people and I'm your God. God's not playing that game. God's not playing the game of, just make me a hashtag on your bio on Instagram. That should do it, No, there needs to be real relationship here. There needs to be real relationship here. They don't know him. And God's not going to play a game. And I love how chapter 1 closes because it's showing that the judgment of God is not without a purpose or a plan. That the judgment of God is not without a purpose or a plan. That the judgment doesn't just terminate on itself. But that God is going to bridge a divide. And really that's the story of what we're going to see throughout Hosea, and the greater story that God's communicating in the Bible is that God is bridging a gap that we've all experienced. One author and pastor in New York City named John Tyson said this. He said one of the great problems of the church is that we read ourselves wrongly in the Bible, that we infuse ourselves into the story. And he said we never want to be the people that we are. We never want to be the Pharisee. We never want to be the tax collector. We never want to be the rich young ruler. We want to be the people of doing heroic feats. We want to be the people that are conquering, and we want to be the people that are victorious. And that's who we want to be. But I've got bad news for you here. Throughout the story of Hosea, you and I, we are Gomer. We're Gomer. Not Hosea. You're not the one who's just committing your love to God and he's just not reciprocating back. That's not the story. And that's the bad news. But the good news is that God's Hosea. That God's Hosea and that he is going to send his son to bridge that gap. That where there was lacking of knowledge. That's what Hosea says in chapter 4. They rebelled because they lacked knowledge. Jesus is going to bridge that gap. Jesus is going to afford the opportunity to know God, and not just informationally, but experientially to know him. Not just a list of facts about him, but know him in the way that Adam knew Eve, a deep level of intimacy. Jesus affords us that. He bridges that gap. It's the story of the Bible that ends with the wedding. That God is bringing us back to himself, and he does it through the person of Jesus, who will relentlessly pursue those that are broken, bruised, battered, sinful, and he'll extend that love. The message of Hosea isn't that God loves you when you're awesome, but that when everything has gone wrong, he has still loved you and pursued you. Let me pray.